Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex topics, pulling out the key insights from different sources, all tailored for you. Today we're diving into something pretty critical, how certain policy decisions are, well, quietly reshaping our climate and mobility futures, and specifically what this means for disabled and autistic people.
Yeah, our main source today is this really insightful article. It's called No Roads Forward on the Quiet Killing of Climate and Mobility Futures by Jaime Hoerricks, a PhD. And it argues that this big piece of legislation, sometimes called the One Big Beautiful Bill, it's meant to streamline things, right? But it has these huge, often kind of hidden consequences, especially for climate action and accessibility, particularly around transport.
Right. So our mission here is to figure out how this bill, and maybe the whole U.S. transport system, really impacts everyday movement, our environmental goals, and what it tells us about, what society actually prioritizes, especially for folks who often get overlooked. Let's get into it. So the article kicks off with this really strong image. Imagine a route planner app, showing buses, trains, EV charging spots, all the possibilities.
Right.
But then in reality, you go there and the bus stop is just bare. Pine tables ripped off, the apps just keep refreshing, showing routes that aren't actually running, charging stations behind locked gates.
Yeah, it's like you can plan. You're even encouraged to plan.
But you can't actually go. There's no way there.
And what's really striking is how the source immediately ties that abstract idea, these ghost routes, to the very real, physical day-to-day reality for disabled people, especially autistic people. Because for so many, mobility was never just a given. It's always been a fight.
So what does that really mean for someone who depends on these systems if the infrastructure just isn't there?
Well, the source points out that many autistic individuals don't drive. Could be sensory overload, processing speed differences, maybe motor coordination, executive dysfunction, fear of police, or even just medical reasons preventing a license.
Right. Makes sense.
So they rely on buses, trains, maybe community ride shares, safe places to walk. And if you're also poor or underemployed, which is common, transport isn't about convenience. It's survival. It's how you get food, get to a doctor, get to work.
And without that mobility, the article argues, you lose access to everything. Work, care, school, food, community. It's all cut off. And it makes this point that politicians might talk about the environment as some abstract future thing.
Right. Distant problem.
But for disabled people, it's right now. It's logistical. It's about their bodies, their safety.
Exactly. And the loss of things like climate subsidies, transit funding, accessible EV infrastructure, it physically traps people, isolates them.
Okay, so connecting this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
How did the U.S. transport system get this way? The source talks about that, right?
It does. It argues American transport isn't really a story of freedom for all. It was never really built for everyone. Think post-WWII, all that investment poured into highways, private cars, suburban sprawl.
Right, the classic American dream, quote unquote.
Exactly. But trains were left to rot. Buses were politically starved for funding.
And the source says this wasn't just an accident. It calls it architecture.
Yeah, architecture of exclusion, basically. Communities that didn't fit that car-centric model, Black communities, poor communities, disabled folks, they were often displaced, their neighborhoods dismantled, or just ignored by the system.
Wow. And the consequences for autistic people.
Lifelong, the article argues. They're treated like outliers because they might not drive, even though they're a significant group. Public transport should have been the answer, but the U.S. never truly invested in it properly.
So outside of big cities, you're stuck.
Pretty much. Infrequent buses, if any.
Yeah.
Very few train routes. It's sparse.
Okay, now here's where it gets really critical for today. This new budget, the funding cuts. What does the article say they'll do?
It's stark. The source says these cuts will gut local transit authorities. They'll cancel electrification projects. Disabled riders will literally be stranded.
And there's no legal fallback.
Apparently not. The article points out there's no constitutional right to mobility in the U.S. So when the system fails, there's often no one held responsible.
That phrase the article uses, mechanism of social death. That's incredibly strong. What does it look like in practice?
It means, being offered a job you just can't physically get to,
Right.
Missing vital therapy because there's no bus, watching life happen somewhere else while you're stuck.
So it's not just inconvenient.
No, it's active exclusion. The source frames it as ensuring that already marginalized autistic people are kept out. Social death.
Let's shift to the climate side of this bill. The article says headlines use nice words. Reprioritizing investments, streamline.
Yeah, euphemisms.
But it argues this one big beautiful bill actually sabotages climate action. How?
According to the source, the cuts are massive, slashing green infrastructure projects, rolling back or narrowing EV tax credits, pulling public transit grants, dissolving high-speed rail pilot programs,
Wow.
community energy projects, grid upgrades, funds for retrofitting buildings to be more efficient, just gone.
The article calls these targeted disinvestments in a survivable world. That implies intent. What's the reasoning behind that framing?
Well, the author sees it as a kind of sleight of hand. You keep the language of progress, but you remove the actual substance, the funding. It draws a parallel to how Medicaid reforms sometimes keep eligibility on paper, but the actual services become impossible to access.
I see.
So just like autistic people's needs can be sidelined, the environment gets treated as optional, deferrable.
Something you can sacrifice.
Right. Climate support becomes just another line item to cut, and the blame gets shifted, to individuals not making green choices or technology not being ready.
But the source insists it's a decision, a policy choice written into the budget lines.
Exactly. A verdict, as the article puts it.
And for autistic people, these environmental cuts have extra layers of impact.
Absolutely. They're more likely to be stuck at home during climate emergencies like heat waves or floods. They might rely on energy guzzling supports medical devices, AC units.
Right. Things that need a stable grid.
And they often live in housing they don't control, so they can't easily make adaptations. The very systems that could help public cooling centers, subsidized retrofits, reliable non-car transport, those are the things being cut.
So the climate crisis gets worse, and the state support system just disappears. The article says it shrugs.
Pretty much. It leaves people stranded.
The article makes another really interesting argument about car culture. It's not just that transport revolves around cars.
No, it enforces them. That's the key point.
Right.
The system is set up to reward owning a car and punish you if you don't. Think zoning laws that separate housing from everything else, highway designs that slice through communities, often working-class Black communities. It forces car dependency.
And for autistic people, this isn't just exclusion. It has carceral teeth. What does that mean?
It means simply existing in public without a car can make you suspicious, especially if you're disabled or perceived differently. Walking while visibly disabled, taking a bus in a wealthy area, even waiting at a bus stop that barely exists. It can attract police scrutiny. You can get in trouble for just trying to navigate the world without a car. It's called transit poverty.
Wow. Okay. And even the supposed solutions like EVs.
Stratified, the source says. EVs are held up as progress, but they're way too expensive for most low-income people.
And inaccessible for many disabled riders, too, right? Getting in and out, charging.
Exactly. And the charging network itself is patchy, unreliable, especially outside affluent areas.
Which brings us to this really striking part of the article about affordable EVs from China.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The source details how there are actually super affordable, practical EVs available elsewhere, particularly from China.
But you can't get them here. Why not?
Protectionist policies, tariffs. The article argues it's not really about protecting workers, it's about protecting the profit margins of a few big U.S. automakers, keeping out the competition to maintain high prices, basically. Monopoly pricing over actually providing mobility.
Can you give some examples? What kind of cars are we talking about?
Yeah, the source lists several.
Right.
Like the Chang'an Lumen starts around $6,900 US. Simple controls, decent range for city driving. The BYD Seagull maybe $19,800 up to 250 miles range, and designed explicitly without unnecessary sensory triggers, which is huge for some autistic drivers.
That's incredible. What else?
The BYD Dolphin around $13,200, calm interior, apparently over $500,000 or already on the road globally. The MG4 EV, $15,800, maybe 320 miles range, clean dashboard, and even simpler, the Welling MA and I EV, like $5,200. Super basic, no frills, just a tiny city car.
$5,000.
Yeah.
These aren't just concepts. They're mass-produced cars people are driving now elsewhere.
Exactly. Proven, simple, quiet, cheap.
But banned here. So the whole idea of consumer choice and mobility.
It's a lie, according to the source. Accessible, affordable options are deliberately kept out. And this traps people, especially poor autistic people who can't afford the limited, expensive options available here.
The article then introduces this really heavy concept, describing these policies as a kind of eugenic filter that needs unpacking.
Yeah, it's a strong term. The author clarifies they don't mean historical eugenics like forced sterilization. It's more structural.
Mm.
Policies that quietly, indirectly remove the conditions needed for certain groups of people to survive. It becomes a way of deciding implicitly who is worth saving, whose life is sustainable.
So the one big beautiful bill might not say we don't support disabled people,
Yeah.
but the effect of gutting transit, cutting climate resilience, making EVs unaffordable.
The effect is that those already on the margins, those without cars, stable housing, AC, political clout, they fall through the cracks first. They're filtered out.
Right. People who can't easily evacuate in a disaster, who are sensitive to extreme heat, who rely on powered medical devices.
Exactly. And autistic people are statistically more likely to be in those vulnerable positions: poor, unemployed, unhoused, heat-sensitive, grid-dependent. And the systems that might have offered protection are being defunded, removed.
So the source argues it's not accidental, it's filtration. Climate adaptation becomes a luxury good.
Right. It creates tiers. Who gets to adapt? Who gets the fancy EV and the cool home versus who's left to just endure, waiting for that bus in 110-degree heat.
A bus that might not even come.
Precisely.
The article uses California as the specific example of this disconnect, right? The progressive image versus the reality.
Yeah, California styles itself as future forward, net zero pledges, shiny renderings of high-speed rail. But for autistic residents who actually rely on public transport, the reality looks different. That high-speed rail from LA to SF stalled, massively over budget.
And local transit.
Shrinking bus routes.
Yeah.
In LA specifically, the source points to metro rail projects being delayed, bus fares going up, paratransit being unreliable.
And the EV infrastructure.
Concentrated in wealthier areas. Meanwhile, electricity rates are soaring, especially for low-income renters who need it most.
So the promises are there, but the delivery
is missing for many. The author shares a personal story driving an old car they can't afford to replace, no bus routes connecting their area to LA. The map shows options, but they evaporate when you try to use them.
The article calls that misdirection.
Yeah. Treating mobility like a stock option you can qualify for on paper, but you never actually get the shares, the promise, not the reality.
So this leads to the idea of a narrative trick used by policymakers. Explain that.
It's about showing you the glossy map, the infographic about EV rebates, the list of grants you may be eligible for.
Make it look like the system works, like help is available.
Exactly. But eligibility is not access. A map isn't a working network. It's just a picture, a performance. It's like those Medicaid services that technically exist but have year-long waiting lists or no providers. You're entitled, but there's no way to actually get it.
And for people living near the edge, autistic, disabled, low-paid, relying on these paper promises is incredibly risky.
It's dangerous. Planning your life around a bus route that disappears or a rebate you can't actually claim, it's not just annoying, it can cause a cascade. Miss a doctor's appointment, lose your job, spiral into crisis.
And the system's response?
The source says the state just insists the system is fine, and you're the one who failed to navigate it properly. It blames the individual.
So what good is a policy if it can't actually be lived?
That's the core question. The article concludes these aren't real protections, they're PR. They obscure the real problems by creating just enough illusion of care to stop people from demanding more, and that quote is chilling. We're not meant to use the system, we're meant to be blamed for not navigating it.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of heavy ground today. Exploring how systems meant to connect can end up trapping and isolating people. The article ends on this really powerful, almost defiant note. They'll say the train is coming, they'll print the schedule, but we know better now. We've stood at too many stops that never mattered, and so we no longer wait.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how it shifts towards a different kind of mobility, not waiting for the state, but building it yourself. For autistic people, for all marginalized communities, the source suggests real movement comes from redefining transit.
How so?
It's the friend who gives you a ride, the neighbor who helps with groceries, the community bike co-op fixing flat tires. It's slow, it's local, it's based on relationships, reciprocity, mutual aid.
So it moves beyond just logistics into solidarity.
Exactly. Refusing the isolation that the author argues capitalism imposes, recognizing shared struggles, even connecting with people in other countries who are building those affordable solutions we talked about.
The article seems to imply that this kind of connection, the solidarity, is actually seen as a threat by those in power.
Yeah, maybe that's why the infrastructure that truly connects people, not just serves markets, often doesn't get built. Connection fosters collective power.
And the final call to action.
It's really inspiring, but we can still build it anyway. with our hands, with our relationships, with our refusal to accept a world that calls our futures optional, our movement, literal and political, will not wait for their approval.
So, wrapping this up for you, our listeners, what does this all mean? Maybe next time you see a shiny new policy announcement or a promise about future infrastructure, think beyond the big picture. Think about the individual journey, the one that might not show up on the official map.
The journey that's built through care, through shared rides, through people helping each other.
Through the maps we draw ourselves together. So, the question the article leaves us with, perhaps, is what routes are you building?